Hi, Jeremy. It's so nice to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. And like I mentioned earlier before we step in, that I am really glad that you honor the invite. Thank you so very much. That means a whole lot, man. Thank you.
Oh, I
Okay,
appreciate
Jeremy. Yeah. You know, I am quite excited to have you on the show today for some reasons. All right. Firstly, my interest in knowledge seeking, because I believe in order to transition from a chaotic situation to that of a beautiful one, it takes the application of knowledge, quality information. And you see, Jeremy, ever since I discovered that the word light in the Hebrew means knowledge and darkness means ignorance, I've been so keen to knowledge seeking because I do not want to remain in the dark. So that's going to make our conversation here today very, very, very important to me and even to the audience. Okay. So now the second reason why I'm excited to have Jeremy on the show is for the sake of the listeners now. You know, I believe there are some things that that some of the listeners needs to hear you say this stuff, directly from your mouth in order for them to get unstuck and experience transformation. I firmly believe that. And lastly, that is me again. You know, I am convinced I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from you, your story, your insights, and your experiences. So, for that reason, Jeremy, let's get started with your introduction. Talk to us about your journey, how you got here. Then, afterwards, I've gotten some beautiful questions for you. Okay, Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you. And what an introduction. Really appreciate all of that. And I agree with your sentiment and purpose. Uh, I too am seeking knowledge through what I do. It was a long road to get here. If you start from the beginning, I grew up very conservatively. Then I had kind of a wild youth. And, you know, kind of through that, I did a lot of really crazy things with my life. And in doing those crazy things, I had a lot of great times, but a lot of bad times too. And those bad times really make you face your life and think about your choices. So I don't live as crazy of a life anymore. And I am a filmmaker, which is a very legal job. And not all my previous jobs were as legal. So I learn from all these different people because my films are documentaries and I don't have any one subject. I do all kinds of different subjects. And in doing that, I fund the projects myself and I get to choose the people that I interview. And so I'm doing topics that I'm interested in. So it's like a adult education in a way. And wow, it has been really, really fascinating and improved my life in many, many ways.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know, I love to listen to people who's got some interesting, life before, now doing some things that are really amazing. There are folks who actually are currently still doing some stuff that ain't legal. You know, if they get to come across this podcast now, your words, I believe, is able to make them have a second thought. What exactly am I doing in my life? You know, that's why I find it very interesting to listen to people like you. Okay, so shall we get started with the questions, Jeremy?
Sure. I'd actually like to say something about that, if that's okay.
All right. Yeah, sure, please
So,
do.
so what I would say is like the thing I learned from doing those risky jobs, and I sold drugs, and I did all kinds of different things, right? And you always have to do it again. And it's one of these things where it seems like this is easy money, that this choice is oh, I could be working hard, and that seems harder, more difficult, slower. There's all these drawbacks from having a hard job or a perceived hard job, because a lot of mainstream jobs are actually better than the criminal jobs. But you see it as the easier choice, and it's not the easier choice. You have to constantly take this risk with your life, and that risk is from other criminals who could rob you or hurt you, and then also from the authorities who could arrest you and do a lot of the same. So it's a choice that seems it's one of those things that you perceive is easier, and like, oh, I'm just going to do this. This is simple. I don't have to think about it. Like, the plan is, very from A to B, simple. But the repercussions are complicated. And so you may get away with it a few times. You may get away with it a lot of times. But eventually, something's going to happen. You're going to get robbed. You're going to get arrested or face some sort of situation that's something you didn't plan for. And it's often the better choice to just kind of do the right thing and kind of live a more conservative life. The risky life, it is fun, but I think the risks always outweigh the reward. So.
That's right. In most of the movies too, it's either something happen one way or another. The repercussion is always there. You're right. So, I would love you to share some insight on cannabis. Can you talk to us about it? Yeah,
Sure.
please.
So I have seen it all in cannabis. I started smoking when I was young for fun, and it was a lot of fun. And at that time, totally illegal. So you felt kind of like a bad boy, or I don't even know how to describe it, just like an outlaw to a certain degree. And you met other people that were willing to take that risk too. And a lot of those people were the cool people in class. And so I remember when I started smoking cannabis, it kind of changed my social status, where I was a nerd, like, somebody that people didn't want to be around. And then when I started smoking weed, they're like, oh, he's okay, kind of thing. And then some people even liked me. And it was interesting to meet those people and realize, oh, they're just like everybody else. But there's this kind of barrier of entry with some of these people. And it seems like a bad thing. Now I kind of think it's a good thing that, everything's too easy these days. So I like that there is some gatekeeping and things like that in the past. But cannabis, from there, became medical for me when I got older and I started having problems with my health. And I smoked cannabis kind of recreationally, and I noticed these medical benefits that were happening to me. And so as I got sick, I was using it for those medical benefits, much more so than I was using it to have fun or relax or whatever. And then that kind of became a bigger fascination. I had a point in my life where I remember facing my love of cannabis and thinking, okay, well, this seems like a lot of people my age are kind of getting out of cannabis, and I still love it. Maybe I should get out of it and grow up. But I love it, and I've kind of seen that there is more to it. Maybe I should just get way into it and get totally fascinated like a bird watcher and know everything about it. And so that's what I chose. I chose to buy books and get way into it. And then it brought me into the industry of cannabis, which is a big thing and a whole other world. And in doing that, I met other people that were doing it for medical purposes and things like that. And so eventually I was able to kind of do events, and the events were a big success. That's probably my greatest identity in the cannabis world, is from the time when I was doing these events, and I had a company related to dabbing. We also won some awards for dabbing early on. That also could be my identity, is like associated with the like rise of dabbing culture. Even that word, it wasn't around when we first were doing it, and that came out while we were doing the whole thing. But when I became a filmmaker and I kind of was ending my career in cannabis, or it had already ended, let's be honest, I decided to do a couple films about people who were using cannabis for medical purposes. And those films are called Cannabis versus Cancer and About Cannabis and Cancer. And there's a lot of instructions in there specifically so that anybody who wants to know about this, they don't have to know me. They don't have to know somebody like me. They don't have to just go to their dispensary or whatever. And they can watch one of these movies, and there's pretty specific advice on how you can treat your various illnesses with cannabis. And it's a little different than people think. Usually it's eating. There's very few things that smoking actually helps, but eating cannabis helps quite a lot of things. So that was one of the big lessons, and I wanted to make those films so that everybody could just watch them for free and get a place to start with using cannabis as medicine rather than just for fun.
Amazing. I mentioned in the beginning, I said, I am convinced that I'm definitely going to learn one or two things from you. And that is happening already. I've always been so curious as to this cannabis thing because I believe it is a plant. Is it a plant?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
plant. It
Yeah.
has
So
flowers, essentially.
mm-hmm. Then I believe God created everything. And when, according to the Bible, when God was creating everything, including the plant, the vegetations, and all, He said, everything is good. And everything includes this cannabis and etc. So then I was now curious, okay, how then is it working this way in people's lives? And, getting to listen to you speak now, that part where you mentioned that it has a lot of benefit as to helping the health, and one can eat it. It has benefit too, when you consume it, eating it and all of that. And now, the documentaries you mentioned, on what platforms are they available? Can I find it on YouTube, Netflix, or?
Yes, they're on YouTube. Usually you
Okay,
can find them on Amazon or on Tubi TV also. Um, on
okay,
Amazon, they are commercial free, but you have to pay for them probably. But on Tubi, they are free. They just have commercials you have to watch. And the same for YouTube.
okay, got that. So the last question, all right. How did your experience in the cannabis industry shape your career in filmmaking?
It brought me into that whole world because I was trying to document something I was doing in cannabis. And in doing that, I learned how to be a documentary filmmaker to a certain degree. And the final steps of trying to get that film made introduced me to the people who I work with now, who took me through the final steps of becoming a documentary filmmaker. And that journey, it was a long journey with a lot of dead ends where I had to maintain perseverance with my mind. There were many times I could have quit and tried to do something else, but I was very determined to get this film made. And the film was about my events. So I was doing these events in cannabis where we were traveling all around the United States, and we were hosting hash competitions. And these hash competitions were in many states in the United States. At first, just a few, and then we grew to quite a lot of them. And then I even did a couple international. I did one in Amsterdam. I did one in Barcelona, Spain. So the event was really, really tied in to the community at the time. And the community responded to the event. It was kind of like an underground, insiders only competition between the greatest hash makers all over the United States and then internationally as well. And that was a new thing at the time because dabbing had just come out kind of a few years before. There were these tools that were associated with smoking hash oil in a new way. And so that whole process kind of took on a culture of its own. And there were little things that were associated with that culture, and they all kind of came together in our event. And it was a way for all of us to get together and celebrate these things that separated us from the other people in cannabis. One thing that's funny about cannabis is it's very diversified. You would think that the old cannabis style was hippies and we're all together and this is like one love and all this stuff, right? But modern cannabis isn't that way. Ever since the industry got into it, people get their identity through cannabis. And it was starting to happen at our events, but it wasn't bad the way it is now. I mean, I guess in some cases maybe it was, but it wasn't the way it is now. And so our event was like this really wholesome thing in one way, and then very competitive in this other way. And we wanted to document this because it was resounding with the community so much. So we started filming a few of these different events, and I paid people to do it. And then as we kind of ran out of funds, we kind of realized, oh, the people I was filming to do these events, they're doing a really good job. We could make this into something. And then through there, I worked with those guys, and they had never made a film either. So it was a learning process for both of us where they would send me stuff, and I'd kind of just like break it down very organically and try and figure it out. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to just take these crude notes about times where things are, and this is good, and that's good, and it's from this time to that time. And I just made up the way that I did it at that time, and we got through it, and it was grueling. And then once we had something, I started showing it to people, and everybody had promised me, oh, I know people on Vice TV. I know all these people, famous people in cannabis. And, you know, we were doing events. We were talking to all the biggest people in the cannabis world. Nobody knew anybody. They had no power. They couldn't get anything to anyone. And, you know, maybe my film wasn't good enough either. Eventually I showed it to these other filmmakers who was a friend of a friend of a friend kind of thing. And they had time for me, and they started explaining, oh, we need to fix it in this way and that way. And we basically made a new film, and that film is called The Secret Cup, and it's also on Amazon and YouTube and Tubi and various other places. You can type my name, Jeremy Norrie, into Google and you'll get my IMDb page, or you can get maybe my website, theskyisland.com. And both those places will take you to my films where you can get links on where to watch them. And you can even just type my name into Amazon or into YouTube or into Tubi, and a lot of times you'll get my films. Or you can type the name of the film and then documentary at the end, and that usually gets them on YouTube. My name doesn't, you get a lot of podcasts on YouTube with my name. So to get my film, usually it's the name of the film and then documentary at the end. But other platforms, you can just put my name, and they have a whole page for me and everything.
Okay, beautiful. I got that. Okay, so Jeremy, to bring this to an end, what would you like to leave the audience with, like a final thought? And
Final thought.
okay, for those ones who would like to get in touch with you, okay, you mentioned your website already. Okay, give us a final thought.
Absolutely. So my website has links to all the different ways to get in touch with me. My website is theskyisland.com. My email, my social media, they're all on there. My IMDb page, there's a link there, and then all my films. So you can kind of individually watch them on various different platforms. I think they're all on YouTube somewhere, and they're all on Tubi somewhere, but they're not all on Amazon, and they're not all on maybe Apple TV or some of the other places. Final thought. As a filmmaker, I want to encourage the audience to do better. My most popular films are not my best work. And so that, as a person doing those films, it encourages me to do not as good work. If people want, mediocre stuff that's just sensationalized, and that's what pays me the most money, that's a lot of, encouragement to do more things like that. Where I've done all these different projects. I did these 3 diet movies recently, and none of them are really doing the kind of numbers that we need to make a successful film. One's okay, but we need films to get hundreds of thousands of views. And the only movies that people like of mine that get those kind of numbers are my strange phenomenon movies. So Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, all that kind of stuff, people love to go watch. But my mindfulness stuff, not so much. The important stuff, it's important. Go watch those, rate them. One of the best things you can do for a filmmaker is rate their movie, or leave a review. So if you like any of my projects, you can go on IMDb or Amazon and leave ratings and reviews. And do that for other filmmakers and other things that you want to see more of. And try to fall into the trap less. Don't watch those little dumb movies and dumb things that'll just capture you for a while. Try to do better.
Try to do better. I got that. That's why we need more of you, more people like you. Because I believe most people needs education as to spending time watching educative movies or some things like what you do, documentaries and all of that. There's this time where I asked my friend a question. I said, between this particular fictional movie, I don't want to mention the title, and this self-improvement movie, which do you prefer? They said, oh, what's my business with self-improvement? Let me watch some things that will catch my emotions and, I prefer the fictional stuff. And I realized that, most people actually need education as to watching things that will help them, like you mentioned, not things that will catch their attentions for a while, but things that will really have great impact on their lives. I got that. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the show, Jeremy. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing this amazing stuff with us. It means a whole lot, man. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I agree with you. I want more education. And I, watch dumb things here and there too. But I try to catch myself watching them and try to stop doing, that too much and try to put things that are of value into my life. That's what I encourage other people to do.
Beautiful.